So, two-factor. Again, this is for the E-Day. Don't come in here next week and tell me you don't understand it when I'm going over it right now. So two-factor, these are the steps to factor. Shh. Listen up here. Otherwise, just sit quietly if you already understand it. First step. Hardest one. Every single problem. You're going to draw the parentheses. Mr. Harrison did this with you guys last year. Did you go step by step and then get all upset because nobody knows how to factor? He didn't?
He told us to draw those first, though.
All right. So draw the parentheses, because it just drives me nuts. If I do an algebra test, should you be able to get 50% of this every single time? You draw the parentheses and you put these first terms in there, you got 50% of the problem done. Draw the parentheses. Second step, find factors of first term. What are factors? My fourth grade son didn't know what a factor was, missed it on a test last week, made me mad. What's a factor? Numbers that multiply together to give you that number, or go into that number. Guess what he did instead of factors on the test? What's the other one everybody confuses with factors? Multiples. So he had the number was 6 or something, and he did 6, 12, 18, 24, when he should have just written down 1 and 6, 2 and 3. All right? So find the factors of the first term. Third step. Put them in. And when you put them in, what you're going to do, you're going to put one there, one there. Put them in the first part of each parenthesis. Then, find the factors of the third term. Number 5. Put them in the parentheses. And where they go is here and here. Now, with this one, little asterisk on this one. With this one, for the factors of the third term, you got to make sure there's two different things that could happen. If your leading coefficient is 1, so if the leading coefficient is 1, which all of these are, then the factors of that third term must multiply to give you the third term and add to give you the second term. Now, the reason that a lot of people don't like factoring is not because of this sheet, but what we did here. The reason most people don't like factoring is when that leading coefficient is something like 10, because then you got to guess and check and everybody gets confused. But all of these have a leading coefficient of 1, so just basic factoring. The sixth thing, check your answer. So that's how you factor. Draw the parentheses, find the factors of the first term, put them in the parentheses. In the first spot in each parentheses, find the factors of the third term. And you want the ones that multiply together to give you the third term, and the ones that add together to give you the second term. And then check your answers.
Freshmen last names M through S that do not have Firefox should report to Mr. Poole at this time. M as in monkey through S as in Sam. Thank you.
Why are you doing that? I have a question. On number 11 where it says -1x squared, does that make any difference at all?
Yeah, we're going to do a couple, so I'm just waiting. So this is how you do it. We're going to do a couple off that worksheet. So Sophie, if you wanted to see a couple off that worksheet, then you might want to make sure you hurry back. No. She was in a meeting, she said.
Did you have it? Did he get mad if you had it? Okay.
No, he's just like, he said it was better to check, cause the way Mr. Fisher made it sound was bad. He's like, there will be consequences. I was like, yeah, it did sound bad.
All right, first side of the worksheet. Pick me a problem off the first side of the worksheet and I'll do one. Number 6.
I mean,
Problem 6.
That was easy, but
I didn't, and I didn't think there were chances.
So we have this. First thing you're going to do, draw the parentheses. This number out here, the 1 out in front, they didn't really need to put those 1s in there on all these, all right? Everybody knows that x squared and 1x squared mean the same thing. You find the factors of x squared. Well, the only factors of x squared are x times x. And that makes it easier because then we know x has to go here, x has to go there. Now the other part, I make a little t-chart out here, this is the way I do it. You want them to, your factors of the third term, which is negative 18, you want them to multiply together to give you negative 18, and you want them to add together to give you the middle number, which is a positive 3. What are some factors of negative 18? Give me
6 and 3.
close.
6 negative 3.
6, negative 3.
That's what I had. I wasn't sure.
Now, does that add together to give you positive 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one checks. That's the one we're going to use. And when we go to write it in here, we write it here and here. So we put a plus 6 and a minus 3. And if all you're doing is factoring, factoring's like division. If all you're doing is factoring, then that's your answer. You're done. So on the front side of the E-Day paper, on the first 12 problems, that's all you have to do is do all that, is do that factor.
It doesn't matter if it's like x minus 3 next.
No, and that's
I
a
didn't
good,
think so.
that's a good point. If you wrote it in this order, means the same thing. Another problem off the front page.
Number 11.
Number 11. Now, if you're out in the real world, most quadratics would look more like this. Because what a quadratic shows you is projectile motion. So it shows you how something, if I was to throw this, how it goes through the air. That's what a quadratic shows you. Does anybody remember what's the graph of a quadratic equation look like?
It's like a U, but of the
What's that called? Anybody remember that?
parabola.
A parabola. If I could draw it, it didn't come out very well because I was up too high. So it looks something like this. Right? Now, when it has the negative out front, it doesn't look like that. It goes this way. And that's more real world stuff because you throw something in the air, what pulls on it? Gravity. So more parabolas are going to be upside down. More of them would actually have this negative out front. So if I do this one, the first thing I would do when I have a negative out front is take it out. So if I put a negative 1 out in front of the parenthesis, what you're actually doing is just dividing each term by negative 1. Well, if you divide that by negative 1, you end up with just x squared. You divide positive 6x by negative 1, you end up with negative 6x. Divide that by negative 1, you end up with negative 7. Does that make sense? Now, it looks just like the rest of it. So now we just do it the exact same way, but you got to make sure that negative 1 stays out there because that's part of your answer. What's the factors of x squared?
7 negative. Oh.
X and x, right? And then we want to find the factors of negative 7,
7 negative 1.
7, negative 1. Does that combine up to give us this negative 6?
No.
No. What are the factors going to be?
Negative 7.
-7, +1. That's the one that's gonna work. So that's the one that we stick in here, -7 + 1. That's our factored form. All right, pick me one off the back. The ones on the back, you're doing the exact same process, but there's a little added to it. None? Nobody wants to see none off this?
Twenty-two.
22. Now, these are different because instead of just being expressions, they're equations. So we're gonna do all the same stuff, we're gonna do all the factoring, but then when we get to the end, we got more to do. Or when we get to where we stopped on the first page, we got more to do. So I'm gonna draw my parentheses. Factors of x squared, x and x. I wanna find the factors of -48. And I understand that a lot of you can probably do this in your head, but if you're getting confused, then you need to draw that little T-chart out there so that you can do stuff with it.
Teacher, pardon interruption.
It's factors
At
of
this time,
-48.
Any CCC student that is in the building, if you have not yet reported to your bus, you should do so at this time. Thank you.
Give me a couple factors of -48. -8 and 6. Is that gonna give us the -2?
Yeah.
So that one's the one that's gonna work. We can stop right there. -8 + 6. Now, that's what we did on the front side. Now, we gotta go a step farther. What you do with this, once you have it all factored, is now you gotta solve it. What you're finding, this is our parabola. What you're finding is where that parabola crosses the x-axis at. All right? Well, all I do here is take this first set of parentheses, and I set it equal to 0. How do I solve that equation?
+8 both sides.
Now, can you do a lot of this in your head probably? Yeah. So our first answer is 8. So that tells us this parabola right over here maybe crosses it at 8. Then I solve the other one, set it equal to 0. What's this point right here where it goes across? -6, 0. That's what you're finding out, all right? And that's all you have to do. Then you gotta find those two solutions. That's what you do on the back side of the page. That makes sense. Everybody remember that? Can do it all now? Don't forget, those are due next week.